Ancient flood stories might be actual records of lost lands. This video explores how global deluge myths, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Celtic legends, could be hiding the geological evidence of real kingdoms swallowed by the sea. By the end, you will see these ancient tales in a completely new light, understanding them not as mere fables, but as potential maps to sunken worlds. What if the ruins of a forgotten coastal civilization lie hidden just offshore, cloaked by the very stories that describe its demise? How many of our oldest stories were born from a real, disappearing coastline? These stories are far from isolated. From the highlands of ancient Mesopotamia to the dense rainforests of the Americas, the same core narrative echoes across continents. A divine warning, a lone boat, a cataclysm of water, and a world washed clean. This is not just a coincidence found in a few neighboring cultures. It is a truly global phenomenon. The hero's name changes from Noah to Ziusudra to Manu, but the plot remains hauntingly familiar. For a long time, many scholars viewed these tales as powerful but purely symbolic parables, stories crafted to teach lessons about morality and the wrath of the gods. Yet their sheer universality begs a different question. Could such a consistent, worldwide story have sprung from nothing but imagination? It seems unlikely. The common thread points toward a common experience, a real and traumatic event so vast it was seared into the collective memory of humanity. The most compelling scientific explanation points to a period of dramatic environmental change at the end of the last ice age. As the great glaciers melted, sea levels rose at a breathtaking pace, not slowly and imperceptibly, but in rapid, terrifying surges. For the people living on those ancient coastlines, this was not a gradual change. It was a deluge. Their world, quite literally, was swallowed by the sea. This global event provides a plausible, physical stage for these universal myths. But what was actually lost when the waters rose? The stories speak of a world before the flood, a world we have long assumed was pure fiction. What if we have been misreading the clues all along, and the ruins of that lost world are closer than we think? That slow, creeping rise of the sea, however, is only one side of the geological story. While the oceans were climbing overall, the land itself was not sitting still. In many parts of the world, the immense weight of the ice sheets had been pressing down on the continents like a giant's hand. When that ice finally melted away, the land, freed from its burden, began to rebound, to spring back upward. This process, called post-glacial rebound, happened at different rates in different places. In some regions, the land rose faster than the sea, pushing the coastline outward. But in other areas, particularly those on the edges of the ice, the land was actually dragged down, creating a seesaw effect that made the relative sea level rise even more dramatic and devastating. So while the global ocean was rising, local coastlines were also sinking, compounding the effect and speeding up the flooding in certain key areas. This was not a uniform, gentle process. It created winners and losers in the ancient geographical lottery. Yet even this combination of rising seas and shifting lands cannot fully explain some of the most vivid and terrifying flood legends, those that speak of a single, monstrous wave that arrived without warning. For that, we must turn to a far more violent and immediate geological mechanism. The slow creep of the sea was sometimes violently interrupted. Geological records reveal terrifying periods where the oceans did not just rise, they surged. These events are known as meltwater pulses, and they completely rewrite our understanding of the flood timeline. Around 14,500 years ago, one such event, called Meltwater Pulse 1A, saw sea levels rocket upward at an almost unimaginable pace. We are not talking about a few centimeters per century. This was a rise of several meters in a single human lifespan. Think about that for a moment. A person could have been born on a coast their grandfather helped settle, and by the time they were an elder, that entire coastline, with its villages and fishing grounds, would have been swallowed by the sea, lost beneath kilometers of advancing water. This was not a slow change you could adapt to. It was a cataclysm witnessed in real time, a trauma so profound it would demand to be remembered in story and song for generations. The likely cause of these pulses was as dramatic as their effect. Picture a colossal ice dam, a wall of ice holding back a vast inland sea of meltwater. When such a dam failed, it did not just leak. It collapsed catastrophically, unleashing a torrent of fresh water into the world's oceans. This was not a gentle rain, but a geological upheaval, a sudden deluge on a continental scale that would have reshaped coastlines almost overnight. This scenario fits the mold of the Great Flood myths with chilling precision. It provides a physical mechanism for the sudden, devastating, and divinely powerful walls of water described in so many ancient traditions. The stories of a world erased by water no longer seem like exaggerated fables. They sound like eyewitness accounts of a real geological terror. If such pulses did indeed drown vast stretches of coastal land with such speed, what traces of the people who lived there could possibly remain for us to find today beneath the churning grey waters of the North Sea? An entire world lies submerged. This was Doggerland, a sprawling, fertile landscape that just 8,000 years ago was not seafloor but solid ground, a land bridge connecting the British Peninsula to the European continent. It was not a barren, icy plain, but a rich, diverse environment of wooded hills, meandering rivers, and vast lagoons teeming with life. For generations, fishermen trawling these waters have hauled up puzzling artifacts, not from shipwrecks, but from the drowned land itself. Their nets bring up the bones of aurochs and red deer, finely crafted stone tools, and even the colossal tusks of woolly mammoths, all pulled from the seabed mud. These were not isolated fragments, but pieces of a forgotten continent. Modern science has now given us eyes to see this lost world. Through advanced seismic mapping, which works like a submarine ultrasound, and the meticulous analysis of sediment cores, scientists have begun to draw a map of Doggerland. They can trace the courses of its great rivers like the Shotten River and identify its sunken hills and central lake. This was not a marginal land, but a heartland, capable of supporting substantial communities of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. Their settlements would have dotted these rivers and lake shores, their lives intertwined with the migrating herds. The drowning of Doggerland was likely a slow-motion catastrophe, a relentless advance of the sea over centuries. A community might retreat from a familiar coastline, only for their children to be forced to retreat again, and their grandchildren after them. The stories born from this long exile would not speak of a single dramatic flood, but of a slowly encroaching, inexorable enemy, a world gradually being eaten by the sea. These narratives, passed down over countless generations, would compress time, their details shifting and evolving, until the slow creep of the waters became the story of a single, divine deluge. Doggerland stands as irrefutable proof that the landscapes of our ancient stories are not mere fantasy. They are real places waiting to be rediscovered. And if one such kingdom lies hidden beneath the North Sea, how many more are concealed along the world's sunken shores? Far to the southeast, another lost continent lies silent beneath warm tropical waters. The Sunda Shelf is a staggering expanse of submerged land, a platform larger than India that once connected the islands of Southeast Asia into a single, vast peninsula geologists call Sundaland. During the last great ice age, this was not a scattered archipelago but a unified continent, a likely cradle for early human migration and a fertile ground for development. As the ice retreated, the sea did not just nibble at its edges, it consumed it whole, transforming a continent into a maze of islands, isolating Borneo, Sumatra, and Java. The memory of this profound loss, however, did not vanish. It is etched deeply into the region's cultural soul. Across Indonesia and Malaysia, vibrant oral traditions and creation myths tell of vast lands that sank beneath the waves. Some stories speak of the anger of the sea god, while others warn of lands lost as punishment for human folly. For generations, these were seen as beautiful, symbolic fables. Then, geologists began to pull cores from the seabed. What they found was astonishing. Deep beneath the sediments of the Java Sea, they identified the channels of ancient, drowned river systems. They uncovered layers of peat, the preserved remains of freshwater forests and swamps that could only have formed on dry land. The mythological sunken world had left a tangible, geological signature. The stories of a drowned homeland were not pure fantasy. They were a preserved memory passed down for thousands of years of a real, cataclysmic event. This powerful link between story and physical evidence offers a tantalizing path for discovery. Yet, this same connection presents a profound and unexpected problem. The very myths that preserve the memory of these lost lands can also actively obscure the search for them, leading us to look in the wrong places for the wrong things. This preference for the symbolic creates a powerful filter, one that has shaped our understanding of human history for centuries. When a scholar reads a myth about a great flood sent by angry gods, the immediate instinct is to analyze its moral lesson, its psychological archetype, or its social function. The story becomes a parable about divine punishment for human arrogance, a metaphor for inner purification, or an allegory for the collapse of a dynasty. On one level, these interpretations are valid and insightful. They reveal how cultures make sense of chaos and change. But this focus on the allegorical can act as a kind of intellectual blindfold. It trains us to look for meaning in the stars while ignoring the evidence that might be buried in the silt. A tale of a coastal city swallowed by the waves is meticulously studied for its theological structure, while the underwater geological surveys that could confirm its existence are never commissioned. The story is filed away in the literature as a fascinating cultural artifact, its potential as a historical document and a geographical guide completely overlooked. This disconnect is not merely an academic curiosity, it has real consequences for discovery. Think of the countless expeditions that have searched for legendary places based on poetic descriptions in ancient texts, often in entirely the wrong locations, because the literal, physical clues within the stories were dismissed as mere decoration. The very narratives that hold the memory of a lost world can, ironically, lead us away from its ruins by convincing us they were never real to begin with. To find what has been lost, we must learn to read these stories again, but this time with a different kind of literacy. We need to approach these ancient texts not only as literature, but as potential eyewitness reports. This requires a fundamental shift, a new methodology that listens to the geology whispering beneath the poetry. This shift in perspective is already yielding results. Take the legend of Wise, a story deeply rooted in Celtic Brittany. It tells of a magnificent city lower than the sea, protected by a great dike and a single locked gate. The king's daughter, Dahut, is said to have stolen the key either for love or treachery and given it to a demonic knight. He opened the gate at high tide, and the ocean rushed in, drowning the city forever. For centuries, this was read as a classic morality tale about sin and divine punishment. But when we apply the new methodology, a different story emerges. We strip away the supernatural night and the theme of punishment. What remains is a powerful, specific memory of a coastal city with sophisticated sea defenses that catastrophically failed. The core of the story is not about a demon, but about a technological marvel, a dike and a gate that was breached, leading to a sudden, devastating inundation. This sounds less like a fable and more like a first-hand account of a tsunami or a massive storm surge overwhelming a low-lying settlement. Geologists studying the coast of Brittany have indeed found evidence of significant coastal subsidence and prehistoric settlements now underwater. The legend of Wise is no longer just a cautionary tale. It is a potential guide pointing researchers towards specific geological clues and locations where a real lost city might lie buried. This is the power of rereading myth not as theology but as history. If a story as fantastical as Wise can hide a plausible geological report, what other legends are waiting to be decoded? The description in the Epic of Gilgamesh is startlingly precise. The storm raged for 6 days and 6 nights. The great boat settled on the slopes of a mountain. Birds were sent out, a dove and a swallow which found no place to land, and finally a raven that did not return. These are not the generic details of a fable. They read like the specific, haunting memories of a real survivor. Geologists looking at this ancient text have identified a potential ground zero for this trauma, the Persian Gulf Basin. Just 8,000 years ago, this was not a gulf at all, but a dry, fertile valley, a paradise crisscrossed by rivers, an ideal home for early human settlements. Then, as the world warmed, the Indian Ocean rose high enough to finally spill over the natural barrier of the Strait of Hormuz. What followed was not a gentle filling, but a violent, rapid inundation. The water would have rushed in, transforming that entire vast basin into a saltwater sea in a geologically short span of time, perhaps within a single generation. For the people living there, this was their entire world being erased before their eyes. The event was so catastrophic, so definitive, that its memory could not be allowed to die. It was woven into the greatest story their civilization would ever produce. The epic's flood is not just a myth, it is a monument to a lost homeland, a geological event translated into narrative. This powerful connection between a specific legend and a known cataclysm gives us a template, a method for re-examining other flood stories around the world. The terrifying Wallam Olam tradition of the Delaware Lenape people describes a powerful snake making the waters swell, a darkening sky, and a desperate, freezing migration to survive. Could this be a preserved memory of a post-glacial flood or a sudden climate shift experienced by the first Americans? The Choctaw legend of a great flood that covered even the highest mountains, with survivors carried to safety on a giant raft, echoes with a familiar fear. When we start listening to these stories not as competing fictions, but as disparate reports from the same global disaster, a new and startling picture of human prehistory begins to emerge from the mist. We start to see a world dotted with sophisticated coastal communities, their histories now written only in water and the stories they left behind. The legend of Cantre'r Gwaelod is a story of a single, fatal mistake. In Welsh tradition, this was the Lowland Hundred, a fertile and prosperous kingdom that now sleeps beneath Cardigan Bay. Its only defense against the sea was a system of dikes and sluice gates, and the sole responsibility for closing the main gate at high tide fell to a man named Sethanin. One night, overwhelmed by drink, he forgot his duty. The gate was left open and the sea poured in, drowning the kingdom forever. For centuries, this was a simple tale of negligence and loss. Yet modern science has pulled this story from the realm of pure myth into the light of historical possibility. geological surveys and sonar mapping across the floor of Cardigan Bay have not found an empty seabed. They have uncovered the stumps of an ancient submerged forest. They have located thick layers of peat, the preserved remains of a terrestrial landscape. Most compellingly, they have identified what appear to be human-made wooden structures, platforms and trackways dating back more than 4,000 years. This is not a vague, symbolic flood. The legend provides a stunningly specific cause, human error, leading to the catastrophic failure of coastal defenses. This detail transforms the story. It suggests a society advanced enough to attempt large-scale land reclamation and seawall construction, a community living on land wrested from the ocean, whose very existence was a precarious balance against the tides. The story of the drunken gatekeeper is no longer just a moral fable. It is a plausible, deeply human explanation for a real archaeological tragedy. It demonstrates that folk memory can preserve not just the fact of a disaster, but its precise social and technological context for thousands of years. While human error can explain a local tragedy, other flood legends point to forces far beyond any human control, to geological violence on a scale that defies comprehension. While human error can explain a local tragedy, other flood legends point to forces far beyond any human control. The sea did not always creep in slowly or surge from distant ice dams. Sometimes it arrived as a single, monstrous wall of water, born from the very ground shaking apart. Not all submerged landscapes were lost to the slow, global rise of the oceans. Many were wiped out in an instant by localized, catastrophic events like tsunamis or the sudden sinking of the land itself. These sudden, violent disasters are perfect candidates for the most dramatic flood myths because they are swift, terrifying, and leave a profound psychological scar on the few who survive. Imagine a community secure in its coastal home when the earth begins to roar. The water at the shore pulls back strangely, then returns as a towering, dark wave that smashes everything in its path. By morning, the entire settlement is gone, leaving only a few survivors to tell a story so unbelievable it must be attributed to the wrath of the gods. This is not just a hypothetical scenario. We have a specific, dated geological event that matches this description with chilling accuracy. Around 6,100 years before the Common Era, a colossal underwater landslide occurred off the coast of Norway. This event, known as the Storegga Slide, involved an entire section of the continental shelf collapsing into the deep sea. The scale is almost impossible to grasp, moving thousands of cubic kilometers of sediment. This collapse triggered a devastating tsunami that radiated out across the North Atlantic. Waves, perhaps dozens of meters high, would have slammed into the coastlines of Scotland, Norway, and Iceland. And they would have struck the last remaining remnants of Doggerland, that once great plain that was already being slowly swallowed by the sea. For any community still clinging to that drowning land, the Storegga Tsunami would have been the final, apocalyptic blow. A catastrophe of this magnitude, witnessed by scattered groups of people, would have generated stories of a world-ending flood, stories that could have traveled with refugees for generations, their details shifting but their core trauma remaining intact. Tsunamis are not the only sudden mechanism. Entire coastlines can also vanish due to tectonic subsidence, where a block of land abruptly drops down along a fault line, or through the compaction of soft, waterlogged sediments on which a settlement was built. The legend of a city that sank beneath the waves in a single night, a tale found in many cultures, fits this geological model perfectly. It is not a metaphor, but a literal description of a community's land collapsing downward, allowing the sea to rush in and claim it forever. Identifying the specific geological trigger is the crucial key to linking a myth to a real event. This is where sophisticated underwater technology becomes our most powerful tool. Side-scan sonar can paint a detailed picture of the seafloor, revealing the scars of ancient landslides and sunken river channels. Core samples can pinpoint layers of tsunami sand, suddenly deposited over the remains of a freshwater peat bog, marking the exact moment the disaster struck. By listening to the stories and then scanning the Earth for their physical echoes, we can begin to reunite the narrative of myth with the evidence of geology. The Great Flood begins to look less like a single event and more like a category of disaster, a recurring nightmare for coastal humanity, with different causes but the same terrible result. These technological eyes are now scanning the world's sunken coastlines with breathtaking clarity. Side-scan sonar paints the seafloor with sound, creating detailed acoustic images that reveal the texture and shape of the bottom. Multibeam bathymetry goes further, firing a fan of sound beams to build precise three-dimensional maps of underwater topography. It can trace the gentle slope of a drowned beach or the sharp cut of a river canyon now 1,000 feet deep. And then there is the sub-bottom profiler, a tool that acts like an ultrasound for the seabed. It sends low-frequency pulses that penetrate layers of mud and sand, revealing what lies buried beneath. This is how we find the ghost rivers, the ancient peat bogs, and the potential footprints of human activity hidden under centuries of silt. These are not just maps, they are time machines pulling back the ocean to show us the lost world as it was. Once a promising feature is identified, the investigation deepens. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, are sent down into the darkness. These robotic submarines, equipped with lights and high-definition cameras and manipulator arms, become our hands and eyes. They can hover over a site, filming every detail, and with careful precision they can excavate, recovering artifacts from the sediment that has protected them for millennia. This technological triad, mapping, profiling, and robotic inspection, has transformed marine archaeology from a game of chance into a rigorous science. The discoveries are no longer just accidental finds in a fisherman's net. They are targeted recoveries. The enigmatic, terraced structures of the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan, whether natural or human-enhanced, stand as a stark reminder that coastlines we consider permanent have shifted dramatically. And the town of Pavloptri in Greece, with its clear street plans, tombs, and buildings dating back over 5,000 years, offers undeniable proof. This was not a mythical city, but a real trading port that now lies beneath the waves, a perfect snapshot of a coastal society captured at the moment it was submerged. This is the crucial bridge between legend and evidence. The technology allows us to test the stories directly. A flood myth from a specific region can now be investigated by mapping that exact coastline, searching for the geological and archaeological signatures the story implies. The search has moved decisively from the pages of ancient texts to the vast, dark plains of the continental shelf. Yet for all its power, this high-tech search is fraught with immense difficulty. The ocean is a jealous guardian of its secrets. The ocean floor is a battlefield for history, actively dismantling the very evidence we seek. Salt water is a relentless chemical solvent, attacking and dissolving metals until they are just ghostly stains in the sediment. Wood, the primary building material of ancient coastal societies, faces an even more voracious enemy. It is consumed by shipworms, which are not worms at all but saltwater clams with a ravenous appetite for timber, and legions of bacteria that break it down into nothing. Even stone, which we think of as eternal, does not survive unscathed. The constant grinding force of waves and currents, combined with the insidious work of burrowing organisms and clinging sea life, will crack, abrade, and eventually pulverize solid rock. Imagine a grand coastal settlement, its wooden longhouses and stone temples standing proud for generations. When the sea claims it, the process of erasure begins immediately. Within a few centuries, the wood is gone, the metal tools have dissolved, and the stones are tumbled into an unidentifiable rubble field. The sea that drowned these kingdoms is the same force that works tirelessly to make them vanish forever. This creates a profound and frustrating puzzle for archaeologists. The evidence that survives is not a representative sample of what was there. It is only what the ocean decided to spare. A site might yield nothing but a single, enigmatic post hole, the dark stain in the earth where a wooden pole once stood. Or it might be a scattered collection of stone tools, durable only because they were made from indestructible flint. Often, the most telling find is a midden, a prehistoric garbage dump filled with the shells of oysters and clams. These fragments are vital clues, but they are whispers, not a full story. They tell us people were here, but they rarely reveal the scale of their society, the complexity of their beliefs, or the grandeur of their architecture. This preservation bias forces us to interpret a grand epic from a handful of surviving words. The most fragile and telling artifacts, like woven baskets, wooden carvings, or leather goods, are almost always the first to disappear. This means our picture of these lost coastal kingdoms is inherently skewed, built from the most durable and often the most mundane leftovers. In the face of this systematic destruction, the flood myth itself often becomes the most complete and resilient artifact, preserving a cultural memory long after the physical world has been washed away. Yet even these fragments, when viewed with a new perspective, can reveal astonishing truths. The line between a forgotten wall and a curiously shaped rock is often frustratingly thin. When a sonar scan reveals something that looks like a straight edge or a perfect circle on the seafloor, the immediate hope is that we have found something built by human hands. But the ocean is a master sculptor capable of creating breathtaking deceptions. The story of the Bimini Road is a cautionary tale for every underwater explorer. Off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas, divers found a mesmerizing path of large, rectangular limestone blocks lying in a neat line. It looked so much like a sunken causeway that it was instantly linked to the legend of Atlantis. The excitement was understandable, but geology often has a simpler explanation. Closer analysis revealed these blocks were a perfect example of natural beak rock, a type of stone that fractures along perfectly straight lines as it forms and erodes. The road to a lost civilization was, in all likelihood, just a beautiful geological accident. This ambiguity is the central challenge of underwater archaeology. How can we be sure? The answer lies not in the shape of the stones, but in the story they tell together. A single, strangely shaped rock is just a rock. An entire settlement, however, leaves a distinct and messy fingerprint. Archaeologists search for what they call cultural material, the everyday debris of human life. They look for scattered pottery shards, their edges worn smooth by the waves. They search for stone tools like arrowheads or grinding stones, made from materials not native to the seabed. The most telling clue of all is often a simple hearth, a pile of stones blackened by ancient fire, with flecks of charcoal that can be carbon dated. When these unambiguous artifacts are found in direct association with a structure, when tools are discovered inside what appears to be a building, or a hearth sits squarely in the center of a stone circle, then the case for a human site becomes compelling. Without that clutter of daily life, even the most temple-like formation remains just a maybe. This high burden of proof is scientifically necessary, but it creates a difficult limbo for many sites hinted at in local legends. A story might speak of a drowned village in a specific bay, and a sonar survey might even reveal a pile of rocks that could be foundations. but without that definitive piece of cultural evidence, the site remains unconfirmed, caught between the tantalizing whisper of the myth and the silent, demanding standards of proof. To bridge this gap, we cannot rely on any single field of study. The true breakthrough comes when divers, geologists, archaeologists, and folklorists all look at the same puzzle from different angles. A single story or a single stone cannot rebuild a lost world. The search for these drowned kingdoms is a grand jigsaw puzzle, but the pieces are scattered across different disciplines, each holding a fragment of the truth without the full picture. A geologist holds a core sample from the seabed, reading the history of sea level rise in the layers of silt. An archaeologist holds a stone tool pulled from the same mud, trying to guess the culture that made it. A folklorist holds an ancient poem about a city swallowed by the waves, analyzing its rhythm and regional variations. For too long, these experts worked in isolation, their findings confined to separate journals and academic conferences. The geologist's data on coastal subsidence was never compared with the folklorist's map of flood legends. The result was a collective blind spot, a failure to see that these were all different accounts of the same historical event. The breakthrough happens when these walls come down, when the geologist can pinpoint a date for a catastrophic tsunami in a specific bay, and the folklorist can then search their records for myths from that exact coastline that speak of a great wave. This correlation gives the archaeologist a precise target, a reason to send a robotic sub to that specific location to search for the scattered stones and post holes of a settlement that met its end in that very disaster. This is not a vague hope, it is a targeted investigation. Climate scientists add another crucial layer, modeling what the landscape would have looked like when it was dry, showing where rivers would have flowed and where the most fertile, and therefore most likely, sites for human settlement would have been. Linguists can trace the migration of words for flood or sea across languages, potentially mapping the routes of displaced survivors. This fusion of data creates a powerful predictive model. It tells us not just that a kingdom was lost, but where to look for its remains and what its people might have experienced. This collaborative spirit is transforming the search from a treasure hunt into a rigorous science. Yet, a compelling challenge to this entire endeavor asks a very simple but profound question. What if we are seeing patterns where none exist? What if the connection between flood myths and drowned lands is just an illusion, a story we are telling ourselves because we want it to be true? A powerful counterargument challenges the very heart of this quest. Skeptics rightly point out that human minds are pattern-seeking engines, and we are exceptionally good at finding connections we already expect to see. This is the trap of confirmation bias. After all, devastating floods are not rare, isolated events. Any culture living near a major river or a coastline will, given enough time, experience a catastrophic inundation. It seems almost inevitable that such a common trauma would be woven into the foundational stories of societies around the world. The similarities between these myths, critics argue, might not point to a shared global cataclysm, but to the simple, universal structure of human storytelling itself. A hero, a disaster, a lesson learned, these are the basic building blocks of narrative. Furthermore, the process of cultural diffusion could easily spread a compelling story from one region to another, with each culture adapting the plot to fit their own gods and landscapes. The geological record itself presents another problem. It is unimaginably vast and incredibly complex. If you search a large enough area across a long enough timeline, you are almost guaranteed to find some evidence of a significant flood, an earthquake, or a tsunami that could be loosely matched to the time frame of a local legend. This does not prove the myth was born from that specific event. It might just be a coincidence, two random facts we have forcefully linked together. This skeptical perspective is not a dismissal, it is a necessary checkpoint. It forces us to move beyond simple, one-to-one correlations and to demand a much higher standard of proof. A compelling case cannot rest on a single story and a single core sample. It must be built on a convergence of evidence, a pattern that emerges only when multiple, independent lines of inquiry all point in the same direction. So how do we distinguish a true memory from a common story? We must stop looking for isolated clues and start searching for a symphony of data, where geology, archaeology, and mythology all sing the same haunting song. The distribution of these ancient stories is far from random. If flood myths were simply universal fables, we would expect to find them scattered evenly across the globe, with no particular pattern to their intensity or detail. But when we lay a map of the world's most vivid and persistent deluge legends over a geological map of post-glacial sea level rise, a striking pattern emerges. The stories cluster with uncanny precision around the very coastlines that experience the most dramatic and traumatic changes. Southeast Asia, the region of the drowned Sundaland continent, is a veritable epicenter of flood lore. The Mediterranean basin, a geological jigsaw puzzle of colliding tectonic plates and submerged river valleys, is another dense cluster. These are not quiet stories of a gentle rising tide. They are loud, specific, and terrifying narratives that echo precisely where the Earth itself was most unstable. This geographical correlation transforms a collection of interesting anecdotes into a powerful set of data. It suggests that the concentration of these myths is a direct reflection of the magnitude of the geological trauma experienced in each region. A coastline that flooded slowly and gently over millennia might generate a simple story of the sea's advance, but a land that was torn apart by tsunamis or rapidly drowned by a sinking shoreline would produce the kind of dramatic, world-ending narrative that demands to be told for thousands of years. This pattern seeking gives researchers a new kind of compass. Instead of searching the entire ocean floor, they can now prioritize these mythological and geological hotspots, focusing their advanced sonar and robotic subs on the areas where the stories and the earth science both scream that something profound was lost. Yet within these rich narrative clusters, the stories themselves hold another, more subtle layer of evidence, a specific type of detail that often survives the slow erosion of time. These forgotten stories can preserve more than just events. They can hold the very blueprint of a lost ecosystem. Within the intricate tapestry of flood myths, we sometimes find startlingly precise descriptions of the landscape and wildlife that vanished beneath the waves. The Welsh legend of Cantre'r Gwaelod does not just speak of a drowned kingdom, it specifically calls it a fertile, low-lying plain. This is not a vague, poetic image. Modern analysis of the submerged peat beds across Cardigan Bay has revealed a treasure trove of preserved pollen grains and plant remains. These tiny, durable time capsules tell a clear story. They show that this was indeed a lush, fertile environment, a mosaic of grassy meadows and light woodlands, a perfect match for the kingdom described in the ancient tale. The myth was not just describing a place, it was remembering its very soil. This pattern of ecological memory extends across the globe. In Aboriginal Australian cultures, there are powerful stories about coastal territories lost to the rising sea. Some of these narratives mention specific, now vanished creatures like the dwarf emu, or describe plants that no longer grow along the modern shoreline. Incredibly, the fossilized remains of these very animals and plants have been discovered in areas that were once dry land, part of the vast continental shelf exposed during the last ice age. The stories and the bones are telling the same story. These embedded details act as a kind of paleo-environmental proxy, a window into the climate and ecosystem of a world we can no longer see. When a myth describes a forest of oak where there is now only open ocean, and a core sample from the seabed confirms the presence of oak pollen from that exact era, the connection ceases to be coincidental. This biological data forges a tangible link, turning a compelling story into a potential historical record. The alignment of these two separate records, the cultural and the scientific, builds a case that is incredibly difficult to dismiss. It suggests that these narratives are far more than symbolic fables. They are the inherited memories of people who actually lived on that land, who hunted those specific animals, and who gathered food from those particular plants before the waters came. This realization forces a profound shift in how we view not just mythology, but the entire timeline of human civilization. This means we have been looking for the earliest Americans and Australians in all the wrong places. For decades, the established narrative of human expansion depicted our ancestors as intrepid inland explorers, following herds of game across vast continents. But what if this picture is incomplete, missing its most crucial chapter? A compelling alternative known as the coastal migration theory proposes a radically different route. It suggests that the most rapid and successful early migrations did not happen across the harsh, unfamiliar interiors of new lands, but along their coastlines, a pathway often called the Kelp Highway. Picture a global network of rich, temperate ecosystems. These coastal zones were not barren shores, but incredibly productive environments, teeming with shellfish, fish, seabirds, and marine mammals. They offered a consistent, reliable food source and relatively easy travel, much simpler than fighting through dense, unknown forests or crossing mountain ranges. Early humans could have hopscotched along these shores, their survival almost guaranteed by the ocean's bounty. This theory elegantly explains how people reached and settled continents like Australia and the Americas with astonishing speed. But it comes with a profound and frustrating caveat. If the real evidence of these first journeys, their campsites, their tool-making stations, and their shell middens, was always located along the ancient shoreline, then that evidence is now almost entirely underwater, buried beneath hundreds of feet of ocean on the continental shelves. The very proof we need to confirm this revolutionary idea lies in the very zones that were drowned by post-glacial sea level rise. Our current maps of human prehistory are therefore not just missing a few pieces, they are missing an entire continent's worth of data, a lost world that was once the bustling highway of human expansion. This forces a complete and dramatic revision of our timelines. The peopling of the world may have happened much earlier and much faster than we ever believed, using routes that are now invisible to us, their memory preserved only in the flood myths that are the ghosts of those drowned landscapes. Finding these sunken coastal settlements is no longer a side quest in archaeology. It is the central challenge for understanding our own story. The task, however, is like searching for a single, dissolved footprint on the bottom of the ocean. The sheer expense of underwater exploration creates a brutal filter on our search for the past. A single day of operating a research vessel equipped with advanced sonar and a remotely operated vehicle can cost tens of thousands of dollars, a figure that quickly drains the limited budgets of archaeological institutions. On land, a team of students with trowels and brushes can carefully excavate a site for months at minimal cost. Beneath the waves, the same investigation requires a small army of specialized technicians, support divers, and engineers, all working against a relentless clock dictated by weather, tides, and the limited endurance of human divers. The most promising sites are often in treacherous, deep waters, where every minute of dive time is a calculated risk. This financial and logistical barrier is the single greatest reason why the vast continental shelves, the very landscapes where our coastal ancestors likely thrived, remain the largest unexplored regions on our planet. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of our own sunken coastlines. The legal complexities are just as murky as the waters themselves. Who owns a prehistoric settlement found on the seabed 50 miles from any modern shore? A dispute can erupt between a coastal nation, a commercial salvage company, a university, and even the descendants of the people who once lived there, each with a different claim and a different agenda. This tangled web of jurisdiction can tie up a discovery for decades, leaving it vulnerable to looters or the slow, destructive power of the sea itself. The high cost and legal gridlock mean that for every site like Pavloptri that is systematically studied, 1,000 others hinted at in sonar surveys and local legends are left untouched, their secrets slowly dissolving in the saltwater. The stories point the way, but our ability to follow that trail is held back by a simple, daunting reality. We need a revolution not just in thinking, but in the very tools we use to see beneath the waves. A silent fleet of robotic explorers is now taking over the search. These autonomous underwater vehicles, or a UVS, are not tethered to a mothership. They are pre-programmed drones that can glide through the dark for days on end, mapping colossal swaths of the seabed with a patience and endurance no human crew could ever match. Their constant, methodical work brings the cost of exploration down from the stratosphere to a sustainable level, transforming a prohibitively expensive quest into a systematic survey. These machines are equipped with a suite of sensors beyond our own. They carry high-resolution sonar to paint the topography, magnetometers to detect faint disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried hearths or metal objects, and sensitive chemical sniffers that can analyze the water for the faint traces of dissolved minerals leached from ancient campfires or tools. They are the perfect surveyors for a lost world, gathering terabytes of raw data from the abyss. Yet this creates a new challenge, a digital deluge of another kind. How do you find a single, ancient post hole in a map of an area the size of a small country? This is where the second half of the technological revolution comes in. Artificial intelligence algorithms can be trained to scan these immense datasets, looking for the subtle fingerprints of human presence. They are not distracted by the natural clutter of the seafloor. They learn to recognize the statistical ghosts of human activity, the unnatural straightness of a potential wall foundation, the perfect right angle of a placed stone, or an anomalous concentration of flint chips amidst featureless mud. This process can even be opened to the world through citizen science platforms, where anyone with an internet connection can help scan sonar images from their living room, turning a global audience into a legion of explorers. This powerful combination of autonomous discovery and crowd-sourced analysis is our best hope for finally pinpointing the ruins we have only been able to imagine. But this leads to a deeper, more philosophical question. What would we actually accept as conclusive proof of a lost coastal kingdom? The evidence for these lost coastal worlds rarely appears as a sunken palace or a golden idol. For the pre-literate societies who lived there, the proof is woven into the very fabric of the landscape itself. Imagine a drowned river estuary, its silty bottom littered not with random shells, but with a concentrated midden of oysters and clams, all harvested and discarded by human hands over generations. This is not a random accumulation. It is the archaeological signature of a community that knew this land intimately. Or picture a submerged peat bog, a time capsule preserving the pollen of plants that were not just gathered, but potentially cultivated and managed. Even a simple, deliberate alignment of stones on the seafloor, a pattern that would be meaningless in the open ocean but forms a clear path or a foundation when viewed as part of the original terrestrial surface, speaks volumes. A scatter of worked flint chips discovered on a seabed now 50 meters deep is one of the most powerful pieces of evidence we can find. It tells a clear, undeniable story. Someone sat there in that exact spot when it was dry land and bathed in sunlight and skillfully knapped a stone tool. They left behind the debris of their daily life. There is no building, no written record, just that silent testament to a moment of human activity. This is the true goal of this search, to reconstruct what scientists call the human use of the continental shelf. We are not just looking for a legendary city. We are trying to prove that these vast, sunken plains were not empty, unexplored frontiers, but were actively inhabited, traveled, and exploited territories, the very heartlands of their ancient world. This broader, more holistic definition of evidence is our greatest asset. It allows us to build a compelling case for a lost way of life, even when the sea has erased all the grand and obvious monuments. The focus shifts dramatically. It moves away from the quest for a single, spectacular Atlantis and toward understanding the entire tapestry of a coastal civilization, their seasonal migration routes, their preferred fishing grounds, their sacred sites overlooking now vanished rivers. We stop searching for a needle in a haystack and start trying to map the entire haystack, recognizing that every tiny, surviving thread helps us understand the whole. This subtle but profound shift in perspective is what finally allows us to listen to the full story the flood legends have been trying to tell us all along. The moment a lost kingdom is found, a new challenge surfaces. The question is no longer just where it is, but who it belongs to. Is a city submerged for 8,000 years the property of the modern country that now controls those territorial waters? Or does it belong to the descendants of the people whose ancestors built it, whose stories kept its memory alive across hundreds of generations? There is a third argument that such profound pieces of our shared human past belong to no single nation or group, but are part of the common heritage of all humankind. This is not a theoretical debate. Each perspective carries weight, and without clear agreements, discovery can quickly lead to conflict. The legal frameworks governing underwater cultural heritage are a tangled net, often trailing far behind the pace of technological discovery. A treasure hunting company operating under a salvage license could legally dismantle a sunken settlement, selling artifacts piece by piece to the highest bidder, effectively erasing its historical context for profit. This has happened, and it continues to happen. The fragile remains of a wooden structure preserved in silt for millennia can be destroyed in an afternoon by a careless diver's fin or the anchor chain of a tourist boat. This is the dark side of the hunt, where the very act of finding a site can be the beginning of its final destruction. The solution, increasingly seen as non-negotiable by leading archaeologists, is to engage with local and indigenous communities from the very beginning. This is not merely a box to check for ethical approval. It is a practical and essential step. The oral traditions of these communities are not just stories, they are archives. Their knowledge of seasonal currents, ancestral fishing grounds, and old place names can provide a living map, guiding scientific surveys to the most promising locations. A community that has told the story of the drowned city for centuries has a vested interest in protecting it. Their stewardship becomes the most powerful preservation tool available, a continuous, generations-long guardianship that no government agency could ever hope to replicate. The exploration of these sites is not just a technical excavation, it is an interaction with a living tradition. To dive on a settlement that a community still considers sacred is a profound responsibility. The goal must shift from simply extracting artifacts to collaboratively understanding a shared history, ensuring that the knowledge gained benefits the people whose heritage it truly is. This human partnership, built on respect and mutual interest, is the only way to ensure that these rediscovered worlds are protected, not plundered. As we pull together the threads of this investigation, a new and startling vision of our past comes into focus. We are witnessing the birth of a new historical paradigm, one built from the unlikely union of ancient stories and modern seabed scans. This synthesis of myth and geology is fundamentally changing our relationship with the past. We are moving beyond the idea that flood legends are merely quaint fables or simple moral lessons. Instead, we are beginning to recognize them for what they truly are: sophisticated cultural transmitters of long-term environmental data. These narratives are not perfect, of course. They are filtered through the lenses of religion, reshaped by centuries of oral retelling, and simplified into the language of gods and heroes. But they are records nonetheless, preserving the core truth of a catastrophic event that befell a community. When we learn to read these stories alongside the geological evidence, something remarkable happens. The myth of a drowned city provides the narrative, and the sonar map of a submerged river valley provides the stage. The legend of a sudden, God-sent wave finds its physical cause in a layer of tsunami sand buried deep in a coastal core sample. Together, they stop being separate curiosities and become two halves of a single, verifiable history. This approach does not diminish the power of these ancient tales. It grounds them in the tangible reality of the earth and water that shaped our world. It transforms them from abstract parables into the lived experiences of our ancestors, making their fear, their loss, and their survival more immediate and more human. The blank pages of human history, the ones written on coastlines now lost beneath the waves, are finally being read. We are no longer just studying myths or just mapping the seafloor. We are starting to listen to the echoes of a world we thought was gone forever, a world whose story is only now beginning to surface. Our journey through these sunken shores reveals a profound truth about our ancestors. They were not merely storytellers, they were witnesses. The great flood myths that echo across the globe are far more than simple allegory. They are the encoded memories of real cataclysms, seared into the bedrock of our cultural memory and passed down through countless generations. These narratives are not competing fictions, but disparate reports from the same global disaster, each one a potential signpost pointing toward a lost chapter of human history. For too long, we have looked at these stories through a single lens, analyzing their symbolism while ignoring their substance. Now, by respectfully re-evaluating oral tradition and marrying it with the powerful tools of modern geology and underwater archaeology, we stand on the cusp of a monumental rediscovery. We are learning to listen to the old tales not as parables but as guides. The evidence is waiting in two places, beneath the churning waves and within the carefully preserved words of the oldest songs and poems. It is a puzzle that demands we bring all our knowledge to the table, from the sonar scan to the folklorist's notebook. The next time you hear an old story from your own culture, a tale of a land lost to the water, I encourage you to listen with fresh ears. Ask yourself what geological truth, what forgotten event, might be preserved within its rhythms. Could it be a memory of a sinking coastline, a tsunami, or a river valley swallowed by the rising sea? If this exploration of the deep past has captivated you, if you wonder what other mysteries lie hidden where the land meets the sea, consider subscribing for more journeys to the places where history and mystery intertwine. And I would love to hear your thoughts. What local legends of sunken worlds do you know? Share them in the comments below.